I did a video some time ago in which I point out that while Jordan Peterson seems very skeptical of efforts to reduce economic inequality, he nonetheless preaches against non-monogamy because he believes that that results in an unequal distribution of sexual partners. He says that this is bad because if some guys have lots of sexual partners, other guys will have none, and this leads to social instability. He said that our culture should enforce monogamy by stigmatizing non-monogamous relationships. That way, by his reasoning, there will be more sexual partners to go around and fewer guys will end up as violent incels. I pointed out in my previous video that income inequality also leads to social instability. In fact, I learned this from Peterson himself. Since that's the case, why doesn't he seem as keen to reduce income inequality as he does to reduce the inequality in the number of sexual partners people have? During his latest appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, Joe brought this up.
One of the ways that societies around the world have figured out that you keep young male aggression under control is by enforcing monogamous standards, because it gives everyone a chance in some sense. So that's the only point that I was making.
Meaning it clears more women will be available for one-on-one relationships, rather than one guy who is some, whatever, for whatever reason, you see large figure in society.
Yeah, well, you see this happening in universities where women outnumber men. So the men hypothetically have more sexual opportunity. But that isn't what happens. What happens is that a small minority of men have all the sexual opportunity. A fairly large minority of men don't. The women are unhappy because they can't find a committed relationship. It's bad for most of the men. And the men who have all the sexual opportunity get cynical.
But isn't this in some ways against your whole idea of equality of outcome? Because you're talking about equality of sexual outcome now. If these men, if you have a guy like a LeBron James that's a dominant basketball player that just kicks everyone's ass, this is a guy who succeeded at the highest level, right? Well, there's going to be people like that sexually. There's going to be people that are better at finding mates, and this is what they enjoy. They enjoy having many mates.
Yep,
they enjoy being, yes, but if this is what they enjoy, if it's a man who doesn't want a family and enjoys dating multiple women, why is that bad?
Well, I think the fundamental reason it's bad is because it's bad in the long run for children.
This seems to be moving the goalpost a bit. At first, Peterson said that we should be against the unequal distribution of sexual partners because the men who are left without will become violent. Now he says his main concern is for the children. Well, poverty is also bad for children. So if we should push equality in the distribution of sexual partners for the sake of children, why should we also not push equality in the distribution of wealth for the sake of children?
Well, first of all, I'm not in favor of unbridled hierarchies.
But you do seem to want to keep a much tighter bridle on the sexual hierarchies than the economic ones. Why?
So why would that help in any way, these involuntary celibates?
Well, I think you tilt the society so that it serves the interests of, well, that's a good question.
What do you think he was going to say there? Joe asked Peterson why he thought enforced monogamy would help incels. And he said it would help because it would tilt society so that it serves the interests of whom? Do you think maybe he was going to say those who don't get as many sexual partners? I think the reason why he stopped himself was because he anticipated that Joe's next question might be, well, if we should tilt society toward those who don't get as much sex, why shouldn't we also tilt society toward those who don't get as much money? Why should that logic not extend to economics? And Peterson probably hasn't thought that through very thoroughly.
Do you see my point? Where
I see your point. There's no doubt about it.
You're almost forcing an inequality of outcome.
I know that was her point too. To the degree that she had a point, that was her point. Now, but it's not. It doesn't run contrary to my opinions that the issue of outcome has to be addressed. I already said there needs to be a reason for the left and the right, and that the problem with hierarchies is that they can get too steep and destabilize everything.
Right.
That does happen. That particularly happens in the sexual domain. And there's plenty of anthropological evidence for that.
There's also plenty of evidence that it happens in the economic domain. Peterson seems to think that there's a ready solution to excessive hierarchy in the sexual domain, but I've never heard him respond to proposed solutions to excessive economic hierarchy with anything other than Red Scare paranoia. It seems to me like it would make a lot more sense to prioritize the problem of excessive economic inequality over the problem of people not getting as many sexual partners as other people, because nobody starves to death because they can't get laid. Nobody ends up homeless because they can't find a woman to sleep with them. Nobody gets denied medical treatment because they've never kissed a girl.
But you still might say, well, who cares? because the men who are winning should be allowed to win and the women should be allowed to choose. It's like,
Right.
yes, except that there's the problem of children.
So is it just about the children now? Is social instability caused by inequality no longer an issue?
And so society steps in on behalf of the children. And you can say, well, lots of people don't want to have children. And yes, and that's truer now than it used to be, although many of those people end up having children anyways, the guys who are sleeping
Yes.
around all the time, so that doesn't circumvent the problem. But the issue here for me isn't the men or the women, it's the children.
I guess so. It looks to me like his original argument doesn't really fit with his ideology and he's abandoned it.